Good afternoon, delegates. Welcome back after lunch. We now have a quorum, so we'll begin this afternoon's business. And as I indicated before lunch, I was just doing a quick catch-up in terms of where we were with the different working groups. I think we were missing a report back on item 64, marine turtles. I don't know if the EU have managed to get a briefing from their chair that they might want to share with us, or whether that's not been possible. So, European Union, could you let us know if you have any update on the working group on marine turtles? And if not, I'll move on. I don't see any requests from the floor, so I assume that's a no. One of the other documents that we kind of deferred coming to a conclusion on was document 83, identifying species at risk of extinction. And this was sent away to enable the proponents to have some informal discussions with other parties and perhaps come back with a suggested way forward. And I think the proponents for the Gambia, Liberia, Niger, Nigeria, and Senegal, and if any of those would like to provide us with an update on any progress they have made, that would be helpful. And again, I don't see any requests from the floor. So perhaps later on, before the end of this session, I will come back on item 64 on marine turtles and document items 83 on identifying species at risk of extinction for some update on how progress is going. I also said that after lunch, we would begin by reviewing some of the summary record documents. So I'm going to begin with document CoP19, COM1, REC1, being the summary record of the first session of Committee 1 on the 15th of November. So if any parties have any comments or observations on COM1, REC1, I invite them to take the floor now. Or any observers, if there are any corrections to be made, but I don't see any requests from the floor. So with that, I think we can consider this document adopted as a record of our first session. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to COM19, COM1, REC2, being the summary record for the second session of Committee 1 on the 15th of November 22. Oh, see the United States. Do you have a comment on REC2, or was it REC1?
REC2.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The comment is on item 61, eels, anguilla species. The last paragraph, the sentence after the sentence that reads, the United States of America agreed with the Secretariat's recommendation to delete decisions 18.197 to 18.202, but did not support the proposal to delete text in draft decision 19 DDA. We would add a sentence there that accurately reflects the discussion. We would add, the Secretariat explained its rationale for this text, and the U.S. ultimately accepted this text. So we would insert that sentence before it was agreed.
Just just check with the rapporteurs that we've captured that. We've captured that. Thank you. United States, so we will make that correction. I now give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding COM1 Rec 2, we note that Canada's position for document 54 was not accurately reflected. That's document 54. Canada's view was to oppose the deletion of paragraph 1 in resolution conf 17.7, Rev CoP18. We would retain this paragraph and not recommend 17.7 be funded from core funds. As such, we will ask for a change in the third paragraph of the record for document 54, and the change is for the third sentence. We ask that the text "and Canada" be struck. So I'll just read the beginning of the third sentence as amended. The United Kingdom considered that the implementation of resolution conf 17.7, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. We've captured that deletion, so that is, we can make those amendments, and I don't see any other requests from the floor. So with that, I consider that this committee has adopted this summary record with the amendments proposed by the US and Canada. We'll now move on to COP19, COM1 Rec 3, which is a summary record of the third session for Committee 1 on the 16th of November. And I see Japan requested the floor, followed by the United States. So Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is about the agenda item number 65, sharks and rays. In paragraph 65 of page 1, in the first line of the second paragraph, Japan, which I quote, Japan called on the Animals Committee and Standing Committee to re-examine document SC-74-24. This is not accurate, so we suggest this sentence be replaced by the following. Japan indicated a process issue and called on the examination of SC-74 info.24 by Animals Committee and Standing Committee. Our intention was to inform that the information document was not cited in the documents of SC-74 and could be inappropriate to refer to the document in the resolution. But Japan also would like to inform that our concern was indicated by legal counsel during the working group on the other day and has been addressed appropriately. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Japan. I think we've captured that amendment. I now turn to the United States, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States edit is to the third paragraph, the last sentence that reads, the United States raised the continued challenges in facilitating the transfer of scientific samples for CITES-listed sharks, and we would add this text to the rest of that sentence, and offered to provide language asking the committees to consider this issue. Should I repeat it?
Yes, please, if you could, United States.
So the last sentence would now read, the United States raised the continued challenges in facilitating the transfer of scientific samples for CITES-listed sharks and offered to provide language asking the committees to consider this issue. End sentence.
Thank you, United States, and we have captured that also, so I give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. It is about working document 62 on agarwood trade. And I'm talking about the third paragraph, starting with Bahrain, China, the European Union, and so on. And we would like to add at the end of this paragraph, I'm starting, the EU highlighted that potential revisions of Resolution Conf 1610 on implementation of the Convention for Agarwood Producing Taxa and consideration of Resolution Conf 1111 Rev CoP18 on regulation of trade in plants and Res Conf 1013 Rev CoP14 on implementation of the Convention for Tree Species must not lead to any weakening of standards and definitions regarding source code A for artificial propagation.
Okay, European Union, I need you to repeat that again, please. That was quite a long sentence, but if you could do so and do so slowly, please. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. At the end of paragraph 3, starting with Bahrain, China, and so on, we would like to add the EU highlighted that potential revisions of Resolution Conf 1610 on implementation of the Convention for Agarwood Producing Taxa and consideration of Res Conf 1111 Rev CoP18 on regulation of trade in plants and Res Conf 1013 Rev CoP14 on implementation of the Convention for Tree Species must not lead to any weakening of standards and definitions regarding source code A for artificial propagation. Shall I read it again?
I think we've captured that now, so we've got the text right. So I now see the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies. I missed one edit to 65, the fourth paragraph, the last sentence that reads, Sea Shepherd Legal, speaking also on behalf of a number of other non-governmental organization observers, raised concerns on, and we would insert before the word progress, the lack of progress.
Thank you, United States. I think we've captured that. I don't see any other requests from the floor. So with those amendments, I think we can consider this to be adopted as a record of our discussions then, as before with the amendments that have just been read out. Right, colleagues, we'll just move on to our next summary record, being COM1 Rec 4, summary record of the fourth session of Committee 1 on the 16th of November. So I open the floor for comments. I see the European Union followed by the United States. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Thank you, Chair. Just under document 70 on rosewood timber species, just to highlight that we have not fully discussed the draft decisions and the text as outlined by the US in the in-session document. So maybe just to highlight that that document and text still has to be agreed.
Okay, thank you. European Union, can you give us your precise text that you want to insert and or precise changes that you would like to see to the record?
Thank you. Yeah, just to say, so after the end as an in-session document, and then maybe add there, the text of this document has not yet been agreed.
So, European Union, we understand the point you're making, that this document hasn't yet been agreed, and that's a fact. And it is going to come back to this committee for further discussion. But this is meant to be a record of what we said and did on the 16th of November. And clearly on the 16th of November, I don't recall anybody saying or noting that the text of this document has not yet been agreed. Of course, it won't be agreed until it comes back to the committee and there's discussion of it. So I'm not sure that your amendment is really reflecting what was discussed at the time. It's stating what we all know to be the case, really, that there's a document to come back. So do you still want this insertion here?
No, that's fine. I take your guidance on that. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, and I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you. This edit is on item 82, trade in medicinal and aromatic plant species. The last paragraph, the last sentence in that paragraph that reads, the committee established a drafting group comprising China, the European Union, the United States of America, and traffic to produce revised draft decisions. We would add after the phrase draft decisions a comma, and this text, to which group the PC chair was invited as well.
So again, this is a similar point, I think, to the one from the European Union. This is a record of what happened on the 16th of November, and I didn't admit the chair of the Plants Committee to the small drafting group on the 16th. That happened at least a day later, and I read it out for the record, so I think that insertion there is not strictly accurate, and I see you nodding, so I think we will not amend the record there. So thank you for that. I don't see any other requests for the floor, so with those, but the Secretariat do have a comment to make.
Thanks, Chair. Just two little errors that we think have crept in. First of all, under item 79 on African tree species on page 2, there it's noted in the second paragraph that United States of America supported the deletion of decision 17302, 18260 to 262, and it's our recollection that in fact that was a conclusion of the committee, and that's not recorded in the record. So we suggest that at the end it adds that the committee agreed to delete decisions 17.302 and 18.260 to 18.262. Just one more point, Chair, in regard of item 84.1 on standard nomenclature on page 4. There's a record there right at the very end of that item where it says decision 17.312 and 17.315 are to be deleted. And just for accuracy, these are 17.312 Rev CoP 18 and 18.315 Rev CoP 18. So it's the revised versions of these two decisions which the committee agreed to delete. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat, for those corrections. So with those amendments and corrections, and I'm not seeing any more requests on the floor, we adopt this record as amended. We will now move on to COM1 Rec 5. Being the summary record for the 5th session of this committee on the 17th of November. So are there any requests for the floor? I see none. So with that, I think we can adopt this as a record of our discussions on the 17th of November in the morning. So we adopt COP19, COM1, Rec 5 without amendment. And just give me a second. I'm seeing just want to check how far we can go with summary rec. So we could go a little bit further with summary records, but maybe 5 for a session is enough for now, and we want to make progress on our agenda for the rest of this afternoon. So before lunch, we concluded Proposal 8. The next item on our agenda is Proposal 9 for Pycnonotus zeylanicus, a transfer from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. The proponents were Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States. And I invite one of the proponents to introduce this proposal to the committee. I see Singapore, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Before we start, Singapore would like to offer our deepest condolences and the thoughts to our neighbors, Indonesia, especially to the families of the victims of the earthquake. Singapore will be introducing the proposal of transferring Pycnonotus zeylanicus, the straw-headed bulbul, from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. Our co-proponents are Malaysia and the United States of America. The straw-headed bulbul occurs in Southeast Asia. Historically, their range extended from southernmost Myanmar and Thailand through peninsular Malaysia to the islands of Borneo, Sumatra, Java. The species is now limited to Singapore, parts of Malaysia, Peninsular Malaysia, Sarawak and Sabah, to name a few, remote parts of Kalimantan in Indonesia, and possibly Brunei. The straw-headed bulbul has experienced a marked population decline across its range in Southeast Asia, resulting from its popularity in the caged bird trade, compounded by habitat loss. Due to the extremely rapid decline, the straw-headed bulbul has been listed as critically endangered in the IUCN Red List of threatened species since 2018. And that's within a short time of 2 years after it was uplisted from vulnerable to endangered as recently as 2016. Overall, the wild population is small, with the latest IUCN Red List assessment for the species conducted in 2020 placing global estimates at a mere 600 to 1,700 mature individuals. The species is assessed to be critically endangered on the IUCN Red List as it is declining extremely rapidly across its range. This is due largely to the trapping of wild birds for the caged bird trade, compounded by habitat loss. Because of this, the straw-headed bulbul is listed on Tier 1 of the IUCN SSC Asian Songbird Trade Specialist Group's priority taxa list as a conservation priority. Poaching and illegal trade of the straw-headed bulbul has been reported over the past 20 years, evidence from seizures, arrests, convictions, and observations from markets. Traffic's Wildlife Trade Information System holds records for a total of 7 seizure incidents between 2014 and 2021, which involved 19 birds, which is reflective of wider illegal trade occurring in recent years. The largest subpopulation resides in Singapore. It's very small, comprising 200 to 500 mature individuals. Singapore is less than 1% of the rapidly reducing geographical distribution of the species. The IUCN Red List assessment reported that the population decline is rapid and likely ongoing, estimated to exceed 80% in the previous 3 generations. Highly sought after for its distinctive calls, it's not surprising that the trapping for the songbird trade is the primary cause for the straw-headed bulbul's decline. Its loud, distinctive calls make it easy to locate them in the wild. Nests are usually constructed in accessible areas, making them relatively easy to spot and trap. While some extent of captive breeding is known, it has been reported that wild-caught straw-headed bulbuls are considered superior and can fetch higher prices than captive birds. Overall, the straw-headed bulbul has a small wild population in very small subpopulations and with a decline in the area and quality of its habitat. It has shown a marked decline in its population size in the wild, which has been attributed to trade impacts compounded by habitat loss. We are of the view that the straw-headed bulbul meets criteria A small I and A small I and C small I in Annex 1 of the Resolution COMS 9.24, Ref CoP19 for its inclusion in Appendix 1. If the Chair permits, we would like to invite the 2 other proponents of this proposal, Malaysia and US, to make their interventions as well.
Yes, please go ahead, United States, and then Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. The United States would like to thank Malaysia and Singapore for introducing this proposal to transfer the straw-headed bulbul from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. As a co-sponsor of this proposal, the United States believes the straw-headed bulbul for inclusion in Appendix 1 clearly qualifies in accordance with the biological criteria in Annex 1 of Resolution COMF 9.24. It has experienced a marked population decline across its range in Southeast Asia, resulting in from the rising popularity of the songbird trade, compounded by habitat loss. The United States continues to be very concerned about the illegal and unsustainable legal trade in songbirds like the strong-headed bulbul, resulting in global declines of songbird populations, many at dramatically rapid rates. While most of the work on trade in songbirds has been focused on Asia, there are significant information gaps for Central and South America and the Caribbean, as well as Africa. As a result, the United States has provided funds to the CITES Secretariat for a study of the songbird trade in the Western Hemisphere, particularly focusing on Latin America and the Caribbean. Given the crisis facing songbirds, particularly in the Southeast Asia, we urge all parties to join us in conserving songbirds now and specifically to support this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, United States. I see Malaysia and Singapore did ask if the floor could be extended to you. Do you wish to speak now? I will, of course, come back to the proponents at the end of the debate, but if you have something specific to add, Malaysia, then please go ahead. But I do want to move the debate on so that we can hear from the rest of the committee as well as the proponents. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. before I start, Malaysia would also like to offer our condolences to our neighbor and fellow Asian member, Indonesia. Malaysia is a co-proponent of this proposal and would like to share why we strongly support upgrading straw-headed bulbul from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. In a recent survey across many parts of Malaysia, this species has not been seen or heard in many of our data collection points. This species has a most melodious call and it has made straw-headed bulbul a target of many poachers. For example, in Sarawak, Malaysia, the species is now only found in the most remote sites, as the more accessible known sites, like the secondary forest, where species has been previously recorded, has now not had any records of their observations in the last 5 years. Their calls are hardly being heard in its habitats, proving that it has not been present in these sites anymore. Of course, the major threat and demand to this species is the songbird trade, and in Malaysia, although captive bred is available, the wild bird is still heavily sought after. More and more, the continuous survey of feedback in the bird groups and websites also show that straw-headed bulbul is already difficult to find. To ensure the survival in the wild, we urge that there is no more international trade at all for wild-caught species. A few weeks before coming to Panama, a team of Malaysians managed to hear wonderful calls of the straw-headed bulbul at an undisclosed location in Singapore. Imagine the joy of hearing these calls after a hiatus of 5 years in our own country, Malaysia. The threat to the species is unrelenting, and Malaysia would like to call all other parties to support this proposal, as the urgency to upgrade the protection of the species to Appendix 1 is imperative. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia and the other co-proponents. I now open the floor for comments from parties. I see first Laos People's Democratic Republic to be followed by Vietnam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Laos PDR support the proposal of Malaysia, Singapore, and United States of America to transfer the Phenonotus silanicus from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. Based on best available scientific information on the species, it is one of the most threatened bird species in Southeast Asian region, with a declining population in its remaining limited ranks, still continuously threatened by the demand for trade. Its listing in Appendix 1 will be consistent for its conservation and protection. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Laos People's Democratic Republic. I now give the floor to Vietnam, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Chair. Vietnam would like to support the listing of straw-head bulbul from CITES Appendix 2 to CITES Appendix 1. We also make considerations on declining size of the species and population that is very small with limited habitat in range country, and this uplisting meet criteria of Resolution Conference 9.2024. By stopping the trade of this species, we do hope that the species can be avoided from extinction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vietnam. I give the floor to Senegal, followed by Indonesia.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. We would like to share our opinion on this proposal. The proposal is one that we have looked at in detail, and we can see that this species, the straw-headed bulbul, has been reduced to 200 to 500 individual specimens, so this is not viable. So if we do not undertake action to protect the species, it risks disappearing. We also see clearly that we have heard from IUCN, BirdLife, and others, which shows the vulnerability of the species. So we can see clearly the threats, which means that we must raise awareness of the danger it is in, and we support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I give the floor to Indonesia, followed by Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. On this proposal, Indonesia is in the view that it is not yet necessary to uplist the straw-head bulbul Pycnonotus zeylanicus into Appendix 1. Hence, listing the species in Appendix 2 is still sufficient. Indonesia is also concerned with the global population status of straw-head bulbul. As 1 out of 9 range states, Indonesia already implements no wild harvest quota, as well as zero export or no international trade of this species in the past 5 years. Indonesia understands the reason for the proponents to increase the status of straw-head bulbul to Appendix 1. Although the wild population of this species is low, many captive breeders have succeeded in the breeding of this species. Indonesia assists more than 300 captive breeders for the sustainable utilization of this species. We record more than 1,000 individuals of straw-head bulbul breed in those captive breeding facilities. We also highlight that the breeding activities are dominantly run by a small business scale that benefits the livelihood of the local community. In the view of uplisting the species into Appendix 1, this is not the solution to improve the population of the species in the wild. On the contrary, it can increase the price that trigger illegal poaching and discourage the small-scale community-based captive breeding operation with the strict requirement as the consequences of the listing into Appendix 1. Thus, we do not support these proposals. Moreover, Indonesia also proposed an amendment, the proposal to be postponed or delayed 24 months if we agree to adopt it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia, and I note your proposed amendment, and I will come back to that later on. But I first give the floor to Kuwait, followed by China.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal meets the criteria for listing in Appendix 1, so Kuwait supports the listing of straw-headed bulbul in Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuwait. I give the floor now to China.
Thank you, Chair. Straw-headed bulbul has experienced a marked population decline and has been assessed as critically endangered in the IUCN Red List. China supports the proposal by Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I give the floor to Guatemala, followed by Thailand.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chair. Guatemala considers that the proposal number 9, to transfer the straw-headed bulbul to Appendix 1 meets the criteria. We would like to congratulate the proponents, Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Guatemala. I give the floor to Thailand, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Thailand commends Malaysia, Singapore, and United States of America in consideration of the proposals to transfer the straw-head bulbul from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1 of CITES. The straw-head bulbul is very rare in Thailand with a small population in the wild. It is listed as a protected species under the Thailand's Wildlife Conservation and Protection Act 2019. In Thailand, the straw bulbul has been listed as protected species under the National Wildlife Protection Law since 1992. Currently, it is protected under the Wild Law in 2019. According to the Act, hunting, the breeding operation, international trade is not allowed. According to our updated data, 7 cases of domestic illegal trade with 11 confiscated specimens has been reported since 2017 to persons. Considering the small population in the wild and the global trend, which indicated that these species tend to be affected by the songbird trapping for commercial purpose. Thailand, as one of the species range states, therefore of the opinion that the transferring this species from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1 of the CITES will provide the opportunity for the better protection of this species, allowing it to remain the wild population to a level at which its survival might not be threatened by the harvesting for international trade. Thailand joins the voice with the co-opponents Malaysia, Singapore, and United States of America, and call for other parties in supporting the inclusion of storehead bulbul to the CITES Appendix 1. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Thailand. I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. The straw-headed bulbul has experienced a marked population decline across its range in Southeast Asia, resulting from its popularity in the cage bird trade, compounded by habitat loss. Wild population is small, estimated to be 600 to 1,700 mature individuals. The species is extinct in Thailand, Myanmar, and Java and Sumatra in Indonesia, and only found in Singapore, parts of Malaysia, and Kalimantan. Due to the extremely rapid decline, the straw-headed bulbul was listed as critically endangered by the IUCN in 2018. Population decline is rapid and likely ongoing, estimated to exceed 80% in the previous 3 generations, approximately 15 years. It is obvious, therefore, that the species meets the criteria for inclusion in Appendix 1, in accordance with the biological criteria in Annex 1 of Resolution Conf 9.24. Therefore, the EU and its member states support this proposal.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Namibia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposal meets the criteria of listing in Appendix 1. Therefore, Nigeria is in support of Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States of America. So I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. I give the floor to Namibia, followed by Benin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Namibia agrees with the submission made by Indonesia on this proposal and do not support the proposal thereof. We further agree with the proposed amendment to this proposal by Indonesia. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Namibia. I give the floor to Benin, then Somalia.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank the proponents of this proposal, Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States of America. And we will avoid repeating all the arguments that we have heard before. This proposal meets the criteria for listing in Appendix 1, and if action is not taken, the species would become extinct, so we support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final party on my list, I give the floor to Somalia.
Thanks, Chair, to give me the floor. The proposal meets the criteria to be enlisted in Annex 1. So we support the proposal of Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. I'll see if there are any requests on the floor from observers for very, very, very short, please, interventions. Okay, I will take 2. So I will go with Humane Society International, followed by Traffic, and close the list for observers there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HSI and Species Survival Network strongly support this extremely necessary proposal for a species that has been in serious decline for many years. It was probably listed on Appendix 2 later than it should have been. We absolutely reject the suggestion from the government of Indonesia that this should be delayed 24 months. There are many cases showing that birds that are sought by the cage bird trade in that part of the world can disappear almost overnight. There is a case of a race of shama from Maratua Island in Indonesia that was common in 2010, drastically reduced in 2011, and unfindable in 2016. We also would note that the BirdLife International a red list account for this species states, and I quote, "Bird breeding does not appear to be alleviating demand for wild-caught birds. With prices so high, this is no surprise. And some breeding operations in Kalimantan visited were considered to be fronts for trading wild-caught birds. Under these circumstances, we do not think that the breeders in Indonesia can be trusted to save this species. It belongs on Appendix 1. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. HSI, I give the floor to Traffic.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is made on behalf of Traffic, AZA, BirdLife International, IAZA, Mandai Nature, Monitor, San Diego Wildlife Alliance, Species 360, Taronga Conservation Society, World Association of Zoos Aquaria, WCS, WWF, and ZSL. We strongly support the proposal by the governments of Singapore, Malaysia, and the United States to transfer the straw-headed bulbul to Appendix 1. The straw-headed bulbul is critically endangered and now believed to persist only in Singapore, Brunei, parts of Malaysia, and remote parts of Kalimantan and Indonesia. The species has declined by more than 80% over the last 15 years. It is believed to have been extirpated from Myanmar and Thailand, as well as parts of Indonesia and Malaysia. And this is almost solely due to trapping for the cage bird trade. Trapping has clearly reduced the global wild population to less than 1,700 mature individuals, with the single known viable population being in Singapore, meaning that the species is one step away from extinction. Appendix 1 listing is therefore urgently needed to halt further declines and potentially allow the species to start to recover. We strongly support the transfer of the straw-headed bulbul into Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Traffic. So in listening to debate, clearly there has been a lot of support expressed for the proposal. There has been some opposition, and a suggested proposed amendment under Rule 25.5 to delay implementation by 24 months. To find a way forward, I would quite like to go to the proponents and ask them what they feel about this proposed amendment, whether they would be willing to accept it or not, before I then go back to Indonesia to try and find a way forward. So if any of the proponents wish to say if they're willing to accept this proposed amendment, I'd be grateful. I see Singapore, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We are cognizant that Indonesia is home to the largest population in Southeast Asia region of more than 270 million people and 18,000 islands. Singapore recognizes that Indonesia may need more time to implement the necessary domestic measures to ensure compliance to M1 listing of no commercial international trade. With the sheer scale and the size of the songbird trade within Indonesia, Singapore suggests a shorter delay of 12 months instead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Singapore. So you're suggesting a compromised delay, but you're willing, I'm assuming, on behalf of your co-proponents, to accept a 12 months delay. And if your co-proponents don't agree with that, they can press their buttons now, but I don't see them. I'll go back to Indonesia in a moment, but Israel, you have asked for the floor. Do you?
Yes, Chair. We, according to the rules of procedure, would like to bring to a vote the original proposal, or at least we would like to bring to a vote the amendment on the original proposal. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Israel. I'm working through the process to find how we resolve this, these different proposed amendments. And of course, we will then, if necessary, follow the process outlined in Rule 25.5. But I do note that all the co-proponents have supported a 12-month delay. So that, in effect, comes in under Rule 24.2. Go for it. So, Indonesia, I would quite like to have your comment on the suggested amendment from the co-proponents, whether that is something you could live with, and if that's the case, then we could perhaps move forward. So, Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We do appreciate all parties in the different view of the proposals of straw-hat bulbuls. And we also thanks to Singapore proposals, and Indonesia agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So under Rule 24.2, a party can at any time withdraw or amend their proposal to reduce its scope. And the co-proponents have done that now, so the original proposal is off the table. Indonesia has withdrawn, I understand, its suggested 24-month delay and is willing to accept the compromise proposal suggested by the co-proponents. And I don't see any likely objection from that. So I think we can adopt by consensus as a recommendation from this committee to the plenary the inclusion of Pycnonotus zeylanicus in Appendix 1 with an annotation that the entry into effect of the inclusion in Appendix 1 will be delayed by 12 months. So I see no request from the floor, so I see that as the conclusion of this committee, and we will make that our recommendation to the final plenary. Thank you all. Just give me a second to sort out papers. We now move on to Proposal 10, which is Phoebastria albatross, the short-tailed albatross, a transfer from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2, and the proponent is the United States. So, United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States is pleased to introduce CoP19 Proposal 10 to transfer the short-tailed or Steller's albatross from CITES Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. The short-tailed albatross is a migratory species. Historically, the albatross occupied islands within the continental shelf and slope regions of the North Pacific Rim. Of the 15 original known breeding sites, only 8 remain. Due to overexploitation from the feather trade during the late 1800s and early 1900s, the albatross was near extinction by the 1930s, but has recovered to an estimated total population size of nearly 6,000 individuals and is increasing at an annual rate of 8.5%. In 1975, the albatross was originally included in CITES Appendix 1. At the 29th meeting of the Animals Committee in 2017, the United States agreed to undertake a review of this species. And at AC 31 in 21, the Animals Committee supported the results of the U.S. review. Our review of this Appendix 1 species indicates that a transfer to Appendix 2 would be appropriate because there is no known risk to the species from international trade. The albatross is listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List and is subject to ongoing recovery and management actions. along with trade restrictions under CITES. A transfer of the species to Appendix 2 is not expected to stimulate increased trade demand, as the feather trade has long since ceased. In closing, the United States seeks party support to transfer the short-tailed albatross from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 and recommends the Conference of the Parties adopt this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, United States of America, for your introduction, and again, reminding us that this proposal arose from the periodic review of the appendices under Resolution Conference 14.8, Rev CoP19. I hope, therefore, that we may be able to move to conclude this proposal quickly, given it has had significant consideration already. But I open the floor for parties, and I see China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the geographical designations regarding China's Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and the Diaoyudao Islands, employed in the proposals 10, 7, 23, 24, 31, and 32 submitted by the United States of America, I would like to make the following statement on behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China. First, there is only one China in the world. The government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legal government representing the whole of China. Taiwan is an inalienable part of the Chinese territory. The One China principle is one of the fundamental norms governing international relations. Any act that creates two Chinas or one China, one Taiwan violates international law. The U.S. proposals have a large number of incorrect descriptions that list Taiwan as a country and fail to correctly indicate that Taiwan province is part of China. What U.S. has done violates the U.S. government's repeatedly declared position of adhering to the One China principle and constitutes a gross violation of China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Second, the Chinese government resumed the exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong and Macau in 1997 and 1999, respectively. Hong Kong and Macau are the two special administrative regions of People's Republic of China and inseparably parts of the Chinese territory. The U.S. proposals contain incorrect descriptions that equate Hong Kong and Macau with China and fail to correctly indicate that Hong Kong and Macau are special administrative regions of China. Third, the Diaoyudao Island and its affiliated islands have been Chinese territory since ancient times. China has indisputable sovereignty over the Diaoyudao Island and its affiliated islands. This factor has been confirmed by a number of international law documents. The U.S. proposals use the term Senkaku Island to label the Diaoyudao Island and its affiliated islands, and describing them as other countries' territory. This is a gross violation of China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and an intentional violation of international law. The Chinese side firmly opposes the above wrong expressions in the U.S. proposals regarding China's Taiwan, Hong Kong SAR, and Macau SAR, and the Diaoyudao Islands. China's competent authorities and institutions have lodged solemn protests against the U.S. administration directly and through the Secretariat of the Convention, and they reserve rights to make further actions against the U.S. The Secretariat is requested to put this statement on record. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, China, for that statement, and I note your request to include it in the summary record, and I assume you want all of your statement in the summary record. But if so, China, can you make sure you give us a copy of the entire statement or the parts of the statement you want included in the summary record so that we can capture that accurately? You have the floor, China, if you want
yes,
to...
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, China. We'll now move on, and first request from the floor was from Japan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In the annex of the notification number 2022/67, dated 19 September 2022, China commented on the proposal, CoP19 Proposal 10, submitted by the United States of America. The Chinese comments in the annex of the notification is not acceptable for the government of Japan for the following reasons. First, there is no doubt that the Senkaku Islands are indisputably an inherited territory of Japan in light of historical facts and based upon international law. Second, indeed, the Senkaku Islands are under the valid control of Japan. There exists no issue of territorial sovereignty to be resolved concerning the Senkaku Islands. In this regard, the government of Japan would like to express that the Chinese comments have no place to be discussed at meetings of CITES, including CoP19. We also request this comment included in the summary record. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. And yes, we can include your statement in the summary record. I think we asked the same thing of you that we asked of China, that you make sure you give the Secretariat and rapporteurs the precise text that you just read out to the floor. So with those two statements to be noted in the summary record, we can move on and invite other comments. I see Guatemala followed by Mexico.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. For Guatemala, it's important to congratulate the proponent, taking into account that the short-tailed albatross was almost extinct in the 50s. We therefore thank the conservation efforts of the range states in order to improve the population of the short-tailed albatross, and therefore Guatemala agrees to the proposal of transferring it to Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Guatemala. I give the floor to Mexico, followed by Cambodia.
Thank you very much, Chair. The species has been observed accidentally in the northwest of Mexico, but it's not a species that is naturally found in our country. Mexico recognizes the efforts in monitoring and conservation of the species by the United States of America. The different measures adopted by the range states have worked, and we have observed an increase in the population of the species, given that international trade is not a threat to this species, and that we not foresee that it will become a threat in the future. Mexico would like to support the proposal to downlist the four-bastral albatross from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2, taking into account the Animal Committee's proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. I give the floor to Cambodia, followed by New Zealand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cambodia aligns itself with Guatemala, Mexico, and congratulate the proponent for this proposal. This is a model of conservation success, and we should support this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Cambodia. I give the floor to New Zealand, followed by Canada, and there are no further requests, so I will close the list there.
Thank you, Chair. New Zealand is a range state of the majority of the species of albatross and mollymawks. are delighted to support this proposal and congratulate the range states for the conservation work they've done in turning this species around since the middle of the 20th century, and agree with the United States that shifting the species from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 will not likely stimulate any further trade of feathers. I think we've got synthetic materials that would now replace feathers for the purpose that they were previously used, so thank you.
Thank you. New Zealand, I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Canada is a range state for the species during the non-breeding season, when small numbers of individuals enter Canadian Pacific waters each year. Canada supports the outcome of the periodic review process. Since the cessation of the historical feather harvest, the population has been steadily increasing. While still subject to various threats, the species has benefited from internationally coordinated conservation efforts. International trade in the species has been minimal, and there is no trade demand. Therefore, Canada supports the transfer of the species from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. And with that, I'd quite like to conclude debate. Clearly, this proposal has been subject to comment, and through the Animals Committee, it's got overwhelming support here. So I propose we recommend to the final plenary the adoption of this proposal, and that we do so by consensus. Thank you. We now move on to our next document, which is Proposal 11, and this is for Caiman latirostris, the population of Brazil. It is a transfer from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. The proponent is Brazil, and Brazil, you have the floor. We got a microphone problem there. Can the technicians give the floor to Brazil?
I think it's right, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Brazil is proposing to downlist the Brazilian population of broad-snouted caiman latirostris, from CITES Appendix 1 to CITES Appendix 2, in accordance with Article 2, Paragraph 2A of the Convention, as well as Resolution Conf 924, Annex 4, Paragraph A2A double I. I would like to start by observing that our original proposal already considered a zero quota for ranched or harvest individuals, although this may not have become clear. Therefore, in order to clarify our intentions, as well as to align our proposal with the assessment made by the Secretariat, which, is worth noting, supports the adoption of our proposal, Brazil would like to amend the proposal to include an annotation to establish a zero annual export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. It's important to emphasize that Caiman latirostris biological attributes do not meet CITES Appendix 1 criteria, as it's clearly demonstrated in our proposal. Indeed, the wild population is not small. On the contrary, it's quite large. The species area of occupation is estimated to be larger than 20,000 square kilometers, with a high probability to find the species in 400,000 hectares in Brazil. Applying a conservative estimated density, total population size could reach over 400,000 or more individuals in its whole distribution range within Brazil. Population is widely distributed in different Brazilian river basins and ecosystems, such as the Atlantic forest, Cerrado, and Pampas. As scientific investigation increases, new Caiman latirostris encounters in Brazil are reported. Data obtained from Federal Research Authorizing System clearly indicates an increase in the geographic occurrence of the species in our territory, which accounts for more than 70% of its global distribution range. There is no declining trend in population size. Several research works reinforces that the species is resilient, reporting an increasing population size of caiman laterostris, particularly in suitable areas near highly urbanized areas. It shows that the species is rather resistant to anthropic impacts and that habitat modification has limited effect on the species distribution. The specimens records in urban and peri-urban areas also indicate that the species are dispersing towards new areas, suggesting an increasing trend in the size of natural populations. Therefore, it's clear that the species does not meet the criteria for Appendix 1 and does meet criteria for Appendix 2. As previously mentioned, Brazil is proposing to establish a zero quota for commercial trade of wild individuals as a safeguard and precautionary measure. In this respect, Brazil has solid legal instruments which regulates management nationally and internationally to prevent effectively unsustainable and illegal trade. We would like to point out that the transfer to Appendix 2 is essential to foster local communities' interests to monitoring natural genetic stocks and to developing a structured bioeconomy productive chain with the sustainable use of caiman laterostris, as recommended by CITES and the Crocodile Specialist Group for other crocodilians in the world. In short, Brazil expects the downlisting results in social development for local communities through the sustainable management of the species, becoming an important incentive to promote natural habitat conservation. In this respect, caiman management in the Service for Conservation is ongoing in other Brazilian ecosystems, such as the Pantanal wetland as the Amazon. Brazil is confident that downlisting the species in the country will not harm or result in any risk to wild populations because, according to current Brazilian regulation, farming is the only management type allowed, and regarding international trade, Brazilian CITES Administrative Authority has effective mechanisms to manage, trace, and control trade. International trade will only be allowed in specimens bred in captivity in accordance with Resolution CONF 10.16. Brazil has been protecting natural populations of caiman laterostris for at least 40 years. Currently, the population has recovered, and a significant part of the species' natural habitats has been preserved. We are confident that we will have the support of other parties to CITES in approving our proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil, and we note you have amended your proposal to include an annotation for a zero annual export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. With that, I open the floor for comments from parties. I see none, and with that, I beg your pardon, Bahrain, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since the scientific investigations indicate that there is increase in the range of the population size, and according to IUCN population categories is least concern, downlisting species to Appendix 2 will help in understanding the population size and will encouraging the range state to develop management plans with zero quota. That's Bahrain actually is supporting this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahrain. I see Argentina waving a flag. Do you have a technical problem with your microphone? Okay, so maybe I'll deal with a couple of other parties, and then we'll try and come back to you, Argentina, but we will give you the... Okay, you're now on our list, so that's fine. I will go first then to the European Union, followed by Guatemala.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the European Union and its member states, we would like to thank Brazil for the presentation of their proposal for broad-snouted caiman to downgrade it from Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. We see that it's there's a big population of about 500,000 individuals. There is no risk of extinction in the near future. As such, it meets the criteria for Appendix 2 according to Article 2, Paragraph 2 of the Convention, as well as the precautionary measures for transfer from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 as the Resolution Conference 924, Ref. CoP19, Annex 4, Paragraph A to A2. Therefore, the European Union and its member states approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Guatemala, followed by Argentina.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Guatemala would like to support this proposal presented by Brazil, and we would like to encourage to continue with these scientific efforts with the management of this species to make sure that we save the species in its wild form. We would like to also see the support in the caiman and crocodile group of experts to support this proposal and ensure a successful program of trading of this species. Thank you.
Thank you, Guatemala. I give the floor to Argentina, then Cuba.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, we would like to recognize and congratulate the Brazilian government for trying to facilitate the necessary mechanisms to stimulate the implementations and the inclusive programs of sustainable advancements of biodiversity that has yielded such good effects on the species, not only in this context, but also in the area of distribution. Argentina believes that the Brazilian populations of caiman latirostris does not meet criteria to be in Appendix 1, but the information they bring does not give us clear information on what the situation is. Having listened to the new proposal of Brazil, where they recognize the intention to implement the precautionary measures of zero annual export quota for wild specimens for trade, commercial purposes, is modifying our opinion. However, and given that the proposal is that the commercial purposes would only be in a closed circuit, we would like to request that they include the control mechanisms that will be implemented once the species is potentially in Appendix 2. We would also like to suggest that the necessary mechanisms be activated in order to generate better information with systematic studies and analysis of the wild populations, area of distribution, and developing of pilot experiences on harvesting of eggs in order to evaluate the social-cultural situation and participation of local communities in these evaluations. For all these reasons, Argentina would like to support this proposal. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Argentina. I give the floor to Cuba, then Peru.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. We would like to congratulate Brazil for this proposal and inform that we support fully this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Peru as the final request from the floor from parties.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Peru supports the proposal presented by Brazil, given that the populations now don't meet the biological criteria on Appendix 1 in accordance with Article 2, Paragraph 2A of the Convention and Resolution 924 Ref COP. And as Guatemala and Argentina, we suggest to continue examining the wild populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. I give the floor to Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kenya thanks Brazil for the presentation of the proposal on transferring the caiman, the broad-snouted caiman, from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. Initially, Kenya was not persuaded to support this proposal, but with the confirmation that there is a notation on zero annual export quota once this proposal is adopted, Kenya now is persuaded to support the proposal by Brazil, having listened to the interventions by the other range states. From the proposal, there is no evidence that Brazil consulted the range states for this species, but now with the intervention made, Kenya supports Brazil's proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. I'll see if there's any requests on the floor from observers for brief interventions. I see only two, so I'll give the floor to both if they can be very succinct with their comments, please. The German Society of Herpetology, followed by traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor. We have compiled some background information on the listing proposals on amphibians and reptiles due to our expertise in these animal groups. So I would like to express our support for that proposal by Brazil, including the annotation. And I have one additional remark. We suggest that Brazil should continue to monitor wild populations as well as the captive breeding groups using the established conservation genetic tools. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I now give the floor to traffic.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We make this intervention on behalf of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and Traffic. We have analyzed exhaustively this proposal by Brazil, and we would like to thank all the clarifications that the Brazilian delegation has made upon presenting the proposal. We see that the population has been recovered since it was listed in the appendixes and since it was protected by national legislation in Brazil. In the criteria for its listing in Appendix 1, in order to be considered a species in Appendix 1, we see that it meet this criteria anymore, and therefore it meets the criteria in Appendix 2 in order to be listed in Appendix 2, as I was saying, in accordance to Resolution 924. The proposal does not speak clearly of a management proposal if listed in Appendix 2, but it does explain that in Brazil, each state has the responsibility of defining the management mechanisms. And until now, not all Brazilian states with the species have shown the will. The annotation on zero annual export quota for wild specimens for commercial purposes, that it currently meets the criteria, the precautionary measures of Annex 4. The crocodile specialist group of IUCN understands that a wider evaluation of all the information that has been published on caiman latirostris would be indeed important in order to evaluate the implementation of the management criteria. And in this sense, we are at Brazil's disposition in case this were to be needed. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I've heard the debate. I think there is a overwhelming support for this proposal as amended by Brazil. There have, of course, been quite a number of comments on management measures and so on, which Brazil may wish to take into consideration. I don't know, Brazil, if you want to make any final remarks or not before I conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have listened carefully the comments. We thank all the delegations for their comments and suggestions. We'll take note, and we'll certainly take them into consideration for the next years. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. And with that, I conclude that this committee recommends to final plenary the adoption of this proposal as amended by consensus. Thank you. Moving on, we are now up to proposal 12. Crocodilus porosus, the population of the Palawan Islands, Philippines, a transfer from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with a 0 export quota for wild specimens. Philippines, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Philippines is a range state of the Crocodilus porosus, or saltwater crocodile, with stronghold populations on the island of Palawan and Mindanao Islands. The population in Palawan Island group has recovered significantly since 1992 from less than 200 individuals, mostly small juveniles, to the current population of 6,000 plus, with a mean rate increase of 12.7% per annum. The current population of Crocodilus porosus no longer meets the criteria for Appendix 1 of Resolution Conference 9.24, revised CoP17, but does meet for the Appendix 2. The population of saltwater crocodiles in the Palawan Islands experienced a series of very real problems in terms of local people who are not receptive to the increasing numbers of saltwater crocodiles, creating positive, tangible incentives for local communities to tolerate Crocodilus porosus is the main compelling reasons. Annex 2B, Criterion B of Resolution Conference 9.24, CoP17, for transferring the Palawan population to Appendix 2. The conservation rationale for splitting listing the Philippine Crocodilus porosus population, Resolution Conference 9.24, revised CoP17, Annex 3, is the same as that for Crocodilus acutus in Colombia in the past CoP17, Proposal 21, which received unanimous support from the parties. An Appendix 2 listings of the Palawan Islands population will not adversely affect the national Crocodilus porosus population. Precautionary measures in Annex 4 of Resolution Conference 9.24, revised CoP17. Palawan is geographically isolated. The Palawan Crocodilus porosus population retain the capacity to recover from depletion through natural growth as well as immigration and emigration from nearby islands, unlike that in Mindanao's stronghold. Crocodiles throughout the Philippines will remain protected under the Philippines Wildlife Act of 2001, and the Philippines will retain stricter domestic measure than CITES, CITES Article 14, with regards to trade in CITES-listed specimens. The Palawan Council for Sustainable Development, the subnational CITES Management Authority for Palawan, provides an added tier of management and enforcement to ensure that this precautionary measure will be in place and functioning. Export for commercial purposes of wild-caught Crocodilus porosus remains prohibited throughout the Philippines and will continue to be so, with the 0 quota of wild Crocodilus porosus from the Palawan Islands, until adaptive management approaches are tested and meet the approval of the parties to CITES. Non-detrimental findings will necessarily precede any proposed exports. However, Mr. Chair, the Philippines would like to amend the proposal to include the annotation of 0 annual export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. We feel that preventing export for non-commercial purposes, such as for scientific research and collaboration, would be counterproductive. Mr. Chair, downlisting the Philippine population of saltwater crocodile from the Palawan Islands to Appendix 2 involves implementation of a sustainable use model to strengthen community appreciation for and promote coexistence with Crocodylus porosus. It gives the community more reasons to keep the wild breeding population intact rather than arbitrarily killing or removing it. This is considered essential for countering the growing prejudice against Crocodylus porosus as a result of human-crocodile conflicts. The Philippine government has put in place the Crocodile Conservation Action Plan of the Philippines 2020 to 2028, the National Protocol on Managing Human-Crocodile Conflicts, and a subnational conservation strategies for crocodiles in Balabac Island 2019 to 2029 by the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development with technical assistance from USAID Protect Wildlife Project. The implementation of the said documents clearly provides guidelines for conservation and management of Crocodylus porosus in Palawan Islands. Mr. Chair, we call on the support of the parties on the transfer of the Philippine Crocodylus porosus population in Palawan Islands from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The Philippines, and I note you have amended your proposal or amended the annotation to your proposal to read a zero annual export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. Thank you. I now open the floor for comments by parties. I see the Solomon Islands, followed by China, followed by the European Union. You have the floor, Solomon Islands.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity for Solomon Islands to intervene. Solomon Islands to appreciate Philippines' determination to downlist saltwater crocodile from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. Solomon Islands is a range state of saltwater crocodile and has more than 30 years moratorium on domestic and international trade. This resulted in increased population of the saltwater crocodile. The increase in population has caused increased crocodile attacks in the rural communities, posing threats to children and people with special needs. Solomon Islands note the proposal of Philippines and fully supports the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon Islands. I give the floor to China, followed by the European Union.
With a strong scientific databasis in the document, the population meets the criteria of CITES Appendix 2. China supports this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I give the floor to the EU.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We thank the Philippines for presenting their proposal to transfer the saltwater crocodile, Crocodylus porosus, population of the Palawan Island from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with a zero export quota for wild specimens. We note that the species is neither globally nor locally threatened, and with a population size of over 5,000 adult specimens, the population of Palawan is reasonably secure. We find that the zero export quota for wild specimens provides a precautionary safeguard in accordance with Annex 4, paragraph A2, little a, 3 little i's of Res Conf 924, Rev CoP19. The EU recognizes the importance of alternative conservation methods which help to increase local acceptance of a growing crocodile population by providing incentives to local communities, with the perspective that it will promote the recolonization of other parts of the Philippines. The EU and its member states support the proposal as amended by the Philippines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Colombia, followed by Namibia.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank the Philippines for their proposal, and having reviewed it and identified that the population is isolated and that there is a recovery of the population, as well as the precautionary measures that have been mentioned just now with the amendment from the proponent, would fit with the local communities, so we support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. I give the floor to Namibia, followed by Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Namibia fully supports Proposal 12 as amended by the proponent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Namibia. I give the floor to Ethiopia, followed by Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Ethiopia also supports this proposal to transfer the Philippine population of crocodile sporosus in Palawan Island from Appendix 1 to 2 with annotation 0 annual export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purpose as recommended by the CITES Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethiopia. I give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe supports Philippines' proposal for the transfer of the Palawan population of Crocodilus sporus from CITES Appendix 2 to Appendix 2, from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. I give the floor to Kenya, and there are no further requests from party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kenya supports the proposal by Philippines as amended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and there's clearly a lot of support for this proposal as amended. If there are any, I will see if there's any observers that desperately feel a need to intervene, but I think direction of travel is very clear here. But I do see IUCN, so IUCN, I will give you the floor, but please be very, very brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We are making this intervention on behalf of IUCN and traffic. I'll keep this very brief. We would just like to make a note that if adopted, this will result in a split listing within the Philippines, which may create implementation problems, and feel that it is important that the Philippines carefully consider the practical regulatory complications associated with split listing of a species within a country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN, and that comment is noted, of course. It seems to me there is overwhelming support for this proposal and that we can proceed to recommend that this committee recommends to the final plenary that this proposal be adopted, and that view is by consensus. With no further requests from the floor, then we can move on, and give me one. And of course, in making that conclusion, I should have noted that the proposal that we recommend for adoption is the one that was amended by the Philippines earlier in their introduction. We now move on to Proposal 13, Crocodilus siamensis, the population of Thailand. And this is for a transfer of the population of Thailand from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with a 0 quota for wild specimens. So, Thailand, you have the floor to make your introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Thailand would like to propose to transfer of the Thai population of crocodile siamensis from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with the 0 quota for wild specimen. Thailand is committed to conservation of the wild siamensis crocodile population and none will enter trade under this proposal. For reasons outlined in the IUCN and traffic analysis for commercial purpose need to be inserted into the annotation committing to a zero quota. Thailand has worked hard to conserve and increase the number of Siamese crocodile in wild. In 2005, the pilot project for reintroduction Siamese crocodile to the wild was launched in collaborating with the Department of National Park, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, Department of Fishery, academic and private sector. The successful reintroduction program has occurred in 2018 and 2020 after CoP19. Thailand seeks the help of the party to better manage Siamese crocodile in Thailand. The fundamental problem, not apparent to some, is that for the purpose of the CITES, we have two separate populations of Siamese crocodile. This is the same in Cambodia and Vietnam. In Thailand, a small wild population reduced before CITES by hunting and later by lice capture from farming had not recovered after 60 years. We estimate 100 to 200 individuals, mostly within fragment protected area population, largely live separate from the local people. Public resistance to reintroductions more crocodiles and not trade is the major concern on rebuilding the wild population. The domestic capture bred population with hybrid and purebred stock now contain 1.2 million animals on 1,500 interlinked farm establishments. After 6 to 7 generations of captive breeding, the population is considered a constant, is a standard domestic farm animal, threatened lice or domestic animal. Only a market and whether we can operate within them. The domestic crocodile industry sustains livelihoods of 1,000 of rural people. The wild and domestic population have different conservation treated and need, require different management action, present different CITES complying challenge, and economically within Thailand, represent conflict investment option. Appendix 2 with the zero quota for wild specimen in Thailand will firstly maintain the exact number safeguard for the wild population. Second, allow purebred Siamese crocodile to continue flow from the domestic to the wild population to enhance the conservation. Third, Thailand is not seeking the complete exclusion of the domestic population, where the wild population remain on Appendix 1 and domestic population is not lit, as is the case with the chinchilla since 1977. A comparable treated wild species with comparable safeguard to the captive production. Fourth, maintenance on Appendix 1 with a zero quota for commercial trade of wild individual will contain to support CITES management of Siamese in the other range state. Fifth, and Appendix 2 listing will assist the domestic population and is managed in many ways. Market of the all captive bred products such as skin, leather goods, meat, pharmaceutical are currently restricted in some countries because the wild population is on the Appendix 1. Management of the 1,500 establishments expect to comply with the Appendix 1 commercial captive breeding on a large, expensive and achieves zero conservation benefit. This will in turn benefit to the wild population because of increased capacity and resources to enhance the conservation of the wild population. Chair, Thailand domestic captive population is directly linked to the wild population because the founder stock were all drawn from depleted wild population. The industrial has supported all the research and restocking of the wild population, has facilitated dialogue with the land state, had cooperate with various NGO, and cooperate with the IUCN's crocodile specialist group, and had been the main champion outside the government of the wild population since. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Thailand, for that introduction, and I note that you have amended the annotation to your proposal so that it now reads a 0 annual export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. With that, I open the floor for comments from parties. Right, I see Indonesia followed by Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia appreciates the proposal proposed by Thailand. However, Indonesia in the view that it is not necessary yet to downlist the Siamese crocodile, Crocodilus siamensis, to Appendix 2. Hence, listing the species Appendix 1 is still sufficient because the demand global markets already fulfilled by production from registered captive breeding facilities. Siamese crocodile is listed as the critically endangered of the IUCN Red List, and in Indonesia, this species is fully protected, with the populations only restricted in Borneo, with total population only 70 individuals. As one of foreign states, Indonesia concerned conservation of this species, and downlisting of this species can increase the demand market price that trigger illegal poaching. Thus, we do not support this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor now to Zimbabwe, followed by the Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Zimbabwe supports any opportunity that creates incentives for range states and communities, and therefore supports the proposal by Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. I give the floor to Lao PDR.
Thank you very much, Chair. Lao PDR fully support the proposal of Thailand to transfer its population of Crocodilus siamensis from Appendix 1 to 2, with a yellow quota for wild specimens. We understand that the species is well established in captivities in farms in Thailand, in addition to Cambodia and Vietnam, with successfully breeding activity by commercial breeding farms in Thailand, registered with CITES Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lao PDR. I give the floor to Cambodia, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to recall that in 2013 at the CITES CoP19 in Bangkok, Thailand, Cambodia as a range state of the species has supported the proposal to transfer Thailand's population of Siamese crocodile, Crocodilus siamensis, from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with 0 quota for wild specimen. We will continue to maintain our support for the proposal at this CITES CoP19 in Panama. Cambodia has a viable wild population of Siamese crocodile in many places throughout the country, around 500 individuals. We currently have about 450 crocodile farms, which we have total breeding stock of around 55,800 head, and with the new hatchling of about 120,000 head per year. As a data shown the transfer of this species from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 is a sign of conservation success by the local community. Such move will enable local farms that breed and raise crocodile to benefit from their many years of conservation effort, as well as to raise the standard of their livelihood. We commend and do appreciate Thailand's effort in re-establishing the crocodile population in the wild. Up and down listing of species of CITES appendices should be a matter of sovereign right of the range state. Any attempt made by non-range state to propose up and down listing of species of CITES appendices would be counterproductive to species conservation effort. As a best practice, the proponents should conduct consultation with and receive support from the range state. In that context, we urge them to show their support to the proposal as a model of conservation success. Cambodia is fully supportive of the conservation effort as enshrined in CITES. Having fully ratified the Conservation Convention, we continue to make our best effort in raising the population of endangered species. It is quite unfortunate, though, that the behavior of the law enforcement agency of some non-range states have resulted in the recent arrest of our official in his way to this meeting. Cambodia strongly opposes any attempt made by non-range states to propose up and down listing of species of CITES appendices without appreciating the real situation on the ground and foremost without proper consultation with the range state. Once again, as a range state, we renew our support to move the Siamese crocodile from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with zero quota for the wild specimen. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, Cambodia. I now give the floor to European Union, followed by China.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. We acknowledge the efforts of Thailand to protect its native fauna. However, although the captive population of the Siamese crocodile is large, the wild population is very small and has a decreasing population trend. As only the wild population lives under natural selection conditions, it is crucial to maintain it on an effective population size, which can genetically ensure the long-term adaptability and survival of the species. This is currently not the case. The species remains threatened by extinction and accordingly meets the criteria for continued inclusion in Appendix 1. Therefore, considering the global and national conservation status, the EU and its member states deem it necessary to oppose the proposal. Still, we encourage Thailand and all other range states to further improve the conservation status of the species until it is no longer threatened and no longer meets the precautionary measures stated in Annex 4 of the CITES Resolution Conference 9.24, Revision CoP19. Many success stories demonstrate the crocodile population can recover under the protection of CITES, and we hope that this will also be the case for crocodile siamensis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to China, followed by the United Kingdom.
Based on the strict management status of these species and the scientific data presented in the document, China supports this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to United Kingdom, followed by the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Thailand for this proposal and the efforts made to conserve this species. The UK notes that at COP16 in 2013, Thailand submitted a proposal to transfer the Thai population of this species from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with a zero quota for wild specimens, which was rejected by parties on the basis that the population still met the biological criteria for inclusion in Appendix 1. Since that time, it appears that the population has not increased, despite reintroduction efforts, and remain sparsely distributed. As such, we consider that the Thai population of this species still meets the biological criteria for inclusion in Appendix 1. We also note the amendments made to national legislation, however insufficient details have been provided to understand whether the domestic measures in place to ensure wild specimens are adequately protected are sufficient and would not be introduced into the captive population or traded illegally. Therefore, it is not clear that the precautionary measures have been satisfied in Annex 4 of ResConf 9.24. And for these reasons, the UK is not in a position to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. United Kingdom, I give the floor to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by Israel.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor. My country is one of mega diversity, and we always oppose all restrictions on sustainable management, and that is why my country would like to congratulate Thailand on its proposal to transfer this to Annex 2 with a zero quota for wild specimens, and so we support it and we call on others to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of the Congo. I give the floor to Israel, followed by Australia.
Thank you, Chair. We wish to align ourselves with the comments by the EU and the UK, which both and others that have commended Thailand for their efforts in captive breeding, but to note that the population in the wild is still in very severe conditions. We would like to bring to the attention of Thailand and this meeting that this is exactly the reason why we've spent so much effort in CITES to establish a procedure to register and monitor operations that breed Appendix 1 species for commercial purposes. The proponents have told us that there are 29 farms within Thailand that are registered as facilities that are under the full administration of the Management Authority and the CITES Secretariat according to the guidelines in Resolution 1210, and we would encourage further use of this mechanism for trade in the species as opposed to moving the entire species to Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. I now give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Australia would support the statements just made by Israel around the use of regulated farms for the trade in the species. We note that while the wild populations of Crocodilus siamensis are small and highly fragmented, and that the species continues to meet the criteria for listing in Appendix 1, and thus oppose the proposal.
Thank you, Australia, and that concludes the list of parties. I will, no it doesn't, I give the floor to Benin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. The wild population is really threatened due to the trade of the species, as well as the egg hunting, and we do not support this proposal. Thank you.
And now I give the floor to Eritrea.
Thank you, Chair. Proposal indicates that the most viable wild population is localized in a specific area with small population, which indicates that the population is threatened. Eritrea therefore opposes the transfer of the Thai population of crocodiles, Siamese, of down lasting from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Eritrea. I will see if there are a couple of interventions, no more from observers. I see only one from Wildlife Management International. Again, if it could be brief, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The wild population of Crocodilus siamensis in Thailand was critically reduced by 1960 and considered close to extinction. It has not recovered since because local people do not want them back. The small wild population of individuals meets the criteria for Appendix 1, but it is threatened by intolerance, not by trade. Against this, Thailand pioneered captive breeding production of crocodilians before CITES and was remarkably successful. The captive domestic population is now more than 1 million animals on 1,500 establishments, supporting the livelihoods of thousands of rural people. The wild and captive populations are completely separated, which makes their management as a single population impractical. Wildlife Management International supports Thailand's request for an expert committee to help resolve how CITES can be more effective in this unique case history. Thank you, Chair.
So, Thailand, you'll have heard the debate, and you've heard, of course, a degree of support, but also a significant degree of opposition as well, even with your amended proposal. So I wonder if you'd like to reflect on the comments you've heard and what you would like to do to take this proposal forward. So, Thailand, do you have the floor?
Yes, please.
You have the floor now.
Yes, yes, please. We in favor to vote for our proposal.
I didn't catch that, did you? Okay. Right, so you don't wish to consider any further amendments and you would like to put your proposal to a vote. Is that correct? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you, Thailand. I see that is probably the only way forward in these circumstances. So we will begin the voting procedure shortly. So can we get all delegates seated, please, and go to your seats and remain there. Can't start the procedure until everyone is seated. So, just to remind everybody, this is a vote for Proposal 13 to transfer Crocodilus siamensis from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2 with an amended annotation which reads a zero annual export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. This is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. This is a proposal to amend the appendices, so it requires a 2/3 majority to succeed. And I will just check that the technicians are ready to go.
We're ready, Chair.
Thank you, technicians. So parties, you have 40 seconds again to cast your vote. The ballot is open now. Technicians could display the result of the vote on the screen. The proposal failed to gather a 2/3 majority, so the recommendation from this committee is that this proposal not be adopted. If technicians could now display the individual votes of parties, please. And I see Thailand requesting the floor. I'll give you the floor in a moment. So I think that is a full cycle of votes, so we can remove that from the screen. Thailand, do you wish to make a final comment? You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. May Thailand request to propose our statement. If you allow, I will list. Yeah. Thailand requests the Secretariat to create a small expert group comprised the AC Chair, Secretariat, crocodile specialist group to help regionalize problem with the wild and domestic population being totally separately. For term of reference, is to provide the guidance to Thailand on how to trade in product from the large and expand domestic product of the crocodile, mainly crocodile Siamese, but include hybrid, which is not threatened by trade, can the best comply with the CITES. Second, to provide guidance to Thailand on CITES expectations with the limits with wide populations where there is public resistance to the rebuilding is substantially. Thank you.
Thank you, Thailand. And one moment, please. So I think, Thailand, if you could give us a copy of your statement so we've got the wording correctly and that you are looking for the guidance and support of Secretariat and perhaps the Animals Committee as well, so we can note that for the record and the Secretariat can look to provide you with assistance in the future over the coming years or months. So with that, I think we can conclude that agenda item and move on to consider proposal 15, which is Certodactylus japorensis, the Jaipur Hill gecko. This is a proposal to include in Appendix 2, and the proponent is India. So, India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India is pleased to introduce CoP19 Proposal 15 to include the Jaipur Hill gecko, Certodactylus japorensis, in Appendix 2 of the Convention of the COP for adoption. The Jaipur Hill gecko is an attractive species of gecko which is endemic to the eastern Ghats of India. It has been recorded from very few localities in the southern Odisha and northern Andhra Pradesh. In total, it has been recorded from only 4 localities, including 1 historical record. The species is handsome looking, very docile, which makes it vulnerable to the international pet trade. Despite its rarity, with so little being known about it, the species appears to have already found its way in the international pet trade as is evidenced by the advertisements on the social media, which is documented in Annex 1 to the proposal. The species is in trade in countries outside of India, and there is demand for the species amongst reptile breeders and traders. We would like to apprise the parties that the Jaipur Hill gecko is proposed to be listed in Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 through a forthcoming amendment which is pending in the Parliament. The habitat of the Jaipur Hill gecko is declining due to forest fires and tourism activities, amongst other causes, and its range does not fall within any protected area. Surveys conducted by the Indian Institute of Science and the Zoological Survey of India has indicated that the population of the species may be declining at a very fast rate. Citrodactylus japorensis is classified as endangered by the IUCN. Citrodactylus japorensis qualifies for listing on Appendix 2 of CITES as it meets the criteria in paragraph 2, parenthesis A of Article 2 of the Convention and criteria A in Annexure 2 small a of the Conference Resolution 9.4, Rev CoP17. Due to restricted area of occurrence of the species, the ongoing decline of the species population, and continued threat to the species, any collection of the species for international pet trade is very likely to have a very detrimental impact on its status. While we believe that the species may actually qualify for inclusion in CITES Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 CITES listing as a start would, number one, provide regulation of international trade in the species and penalties for violations, thereby helping in controlling illegal export of the species from India, and number two, generate trade data regarding international trade and demand for the species. We draw the attention of the parties to IUCN and Traffic's analysis of COP19 proposals, where both of which conclude that the species appear to meet the criteria for Appendix 2 listing. We urge the parties to support our proposal to list the Jaipur Hill gecko, the Appendix 2 of the Convention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. And with that, I open the floor for comments from parties. I see the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. It is typical for species of the genus Cyrtodactylus to have a small range, and this does not necessarily cause any conservation concerns. However, the situation for Cyrtodactylus japorensis seems to be different. The recent rediscovery of the small gecko species created a specific demand, and market prices are so high that they might stimulate an unsustainable exploitation of the two small areas where the species occurs. Therefore, the EU and its member states consider it necessary to include the species in Appendix 2, and we hope that this will protect it from unsustainable and illegal international trade. And if I might add, we had also a proposal number 14. Might this have been skipped accidentally? Thank you.
You are correct, European Union. I picked up two pieces of paper at once, I think, so I thought we were making good progress. We'll come back to proposal 14 in a few minutes when we have resolved this proposal. So thank you. We note your support. I don't see any further requests from the floor. Whenever I say that, someone presses the button. So Niger, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Niger supports this proposal, and on the basis of the arguments in favor of India's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Niger. And I am interpreting the absence of requests from parties as indicating support for this proposal. So we can resolve it very quickly, I hope. I will give a chance for observers to make very brief comments if they wish. But given the the brevity of the few requests from parties and overall consensus, I mean extremely short comments. So the Wildlife Trust of India, you have the floor. You have the floor, Wildlife Trust of India. Begin speaking, your microphone should be on.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of Wildlife Trust of India, SSN, Robin Dibua, HSI, Foundation CITES, JTF, Bond Free, I4, AWI, ADM Capital Foundation, and the NRDC. Since this is the first time that Wildlife Trust of India has the floor, we would like to take the opportunity to thank our host country, Panama, for facilitating COP19 successfully. We would further like to thank the chair on their management of matters of the committee. Our thoughts and prayers lie with the people of Indonesia. We draw the party's attention to the precarious conservation status of Jaipur Hill gecko, which is an endemic species known to occur in 4 locations within 100 square kilometers in the Eastern Ghats of India. Considered extinct and rediscovered after 132 years, now being sold in the cyberspace as a collector's prized possession, this gecko should be protected from illegal trade to ensure that we don't need to upgrade it into Appendix 1. WTI's Cyber Spotter network, which monitors illegal wildlife trade in the cyberspace, has encountered multiple trade attempts for this species. Apart from collection for the international pet trade, the species also face threats to its habitat. The species has a restricted area of occurrence and it is limited to a small population. Pursuant to the IUCN traffic analysis, there is a credible risk that any collection for trade is likely to have a detrimental impact on its survival in the wild. It's clear that the Jaipur Hill gecko meets the criteria for listing on Appendix 2 of the convention, and we urge the parties to support India's proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wildlife Trust of India. And given that the parties have already indicated their support, I think we can take that for granted. And I'm going to not invite any more observers to take the floor. The direction of or the results, I think, of this debate are fairly clear. So I think I can conclude this debate by concluding that this committee recommends that this proposal be adopted, and we did so by consensus. So with that, we can now move on and move backwards on our agenda to the proposal I managed to miss. With my apologies to the European Union, we can now go back to Proposal 14, Physignathus coccincinus, for the inclusion in Appendix 2, the European Union and Vietnam, and I invite one of the co-proponents to introduce this document. Vietnam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Vietnam, together with the EU proposal to include the ASEAN water dragons, Physignathus coccincinus, in Appendix 2 in accordance with the Annex 2 of Resolutions Conf 9.24. COP17, we thank the EU for the fruitful collaboration in working on the proposal. Physignathus coccincinus is known from China, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. The water dragon is a habitat specialist. Population of this species have been declined due to habitat degradations and over-harvesting for trade. In Vietnam, our recent research shows that Physignathus coccincinus occur in low population densities, small population size, and reduced recruitment observed during our field survey conducted at several locations in Vietnam are attributed to over-harvesting for food and purchase, which are considered a major threat to the species. Based on available data, the species have been assessed as vulnerable in the IUCN Red List, as well as in Vietnam Red List data. It considers endangered in Thailand and China. Available CITES data suggests more than 1.4 million individuals of the water dragon was recorded to be imported in the EU and US from 1999 to 2019. Most specimens in CITES was collected from the wild in Vietnam. Physiognathus cocincinus is commonly found for sale both on physical markets and pet shops as well as online platforms. Given the high number of wild source specimens in international CITES and no additional harvest for domestic use in relation to low density found in the wild, special habitat requirements of semi-aquatic species and a vulnerable threat status, we propose the party to support the proposal to list Physiognathus cocincinus in Appendix 2 of the Convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Vietnam. And I now open the floor for comments by parties. Okay. I see the European Union. You want to make additional comments, followed by Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. The EU highly appreciates the close collaboration with Vietnam in drafting the proposal and the joint research activities, including population studies and market surveys on the semi-aquatic species in northern, central, and southern Vietnam that have been referred to by the representative of Vietnam and provided a profound scientific basis for this proposal and point to low population densities. While international trade in Physiognathus cocincinus has been documented at least since the 1970s, trade in the species into the EU is being closely monitored since its listing in Annex D of the EU Council Regulation number 338/97 in 2010. As already mentioned by Vietnam, recorded imports to the EU and the US involved about 70,000 mostly wild-caught specimens per year. As prices for the species remain low, there currently appear to be few incentives for large-scale captive breeding as alternative to collection from the wild, even though wild-caught specimens do worse in captivity. Thus, it is likely that international trade will continue to focus on wild specimens if trade is not regulated. Considering the high numbers of wild-source specimens in the international trade and the low population densities of this vulnerable species, as already pointed out by the representative of Vietnam, we invite the parties to support the proposal to list Physiognathus cocincinus in Appendix 2 of the Convention. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor now to the Lao People's Democratic Republic, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the governments of Laos, I would like to support the proposal from Vietnam and European Union to include the Physiognathus cocincinus of water dragon in CITES Appendix 2. We believe that its listing in Appendix 2 will improve conservation and management of its population by ensuring that harvest from the wild will not negatively impact the conservation of its wild population in Lao PDR. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lao PDR. I give the floor to Senegal, followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Chair. On this proposal, in order to list the water dragon in Appendix 2, we believe that this listing is not yet adequate. We believe that local management should be done to protect the species. We believe that the listing of this species in Appendix 2 is no longer justified, taking into account what is laid out in the proposal, and we believe that the current status of conservation does not permit or meet the criteria to list it in Appendix 2, maybe Appendix 3. And we believe that it does not meet the criteria to be listed in Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by Thailand.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the EU and Vietnam for bringing forward this proposal. The UK agrees that the Chinese water dragon meets the criteria for listing on Appendix 2 due to its prevalence in trade, its status as a habitat specialist with low population densities and small population sizes, and vulnerable conservation status. The species is primarily threatened by collection for the pet trade and human consumption, as well as habitat degradation and fragmentation in its natural range. Therefore, regulation of trade is necessary to prevent further declines and future listing on Appendix 1. The UK supports this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I give the floor to Thailand, followed by Niger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Thailand congratulates the European Union and Vietnam to list the Chinese water dragon in CITES Appendix 2. In Thailand, the Chinese water dragon has been listed as a protected species under the Wild Animal Conservation and Protection Act 2019. And according to the Act, the hunting or the breeding operation of the net trade are not allowed. Regarding the information related to the proposals, this species tends to be threatened by the illegal trade, both nationally and internationally. Moreover, its population in the wild becomes less in number caused by deforestation. Thailand, as the range state of the Chinese water dragon, is of the opinion that listing this species in the CITES Appendix 2 will help in reducing the threat from the illegal and unregulated trade, and more importantly, support legal and sustainable international trade, while safeguarding the survival of such species. Thailand therefore joins the voice with the co-opponents, the European Union and Vietnam, to list the Chinese water dragon in CITES Appendix 2. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Thailand. I now give the floor to Niger, followed by Burkina Faso.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We have followed the detail that has been given on this proposal, and we think that the justifications stated by the European Union do not seem tangible. That is why we support Senegal, and we request a vote on this proposal.
Thank you, Niger. Go now to Burkina Faso, followed by Guinea.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Burkina Faso supports Senegal in the position. We are not in favor of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Guinea, followed by Gabon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Guinea also opposes this proposal from the European Union. It is not very convincing in terms of data, and we do not believe the species meets the criteria for listing in Appendix 2. We request that a vote be taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea. I give the floor to Gabon, followed by Ghana.
Thank you, Chair. Gabon will be brief in their statement, and we align ourselves with those who have spoken before us, Senegal, Niger, Mali, Burkina and Guinea, and so we do not support the listing of this species in Appendix 2. And we also request that this proposal be submitted to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabon. I give the floor to Ghana, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Chair. Ghana congratulates EU and Vietnam for the proposal to list water dragon in Appendix 2. However, after careful consideration and listening to interventions from parties, Ghana wished to align herself with Senegal and other parties and encourage all parties to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nigeria would like to align itself with other parties in the sub-region, Senegal, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Ghana, and etc. Nigeria is not in support of listing this species in Appendix 2. So we encourage all the other parties to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. I give the floor to Liberia, followed by the Congo.
Thank you, Chair. Let me align myself with Senegal and the other previous speakers. Looking at the proposal, I don't think there is enough baseline information to convince it to be for the species to be upgraded to Appendix 2. So we oppose this. Liberia oppose the proposal from the EU. Thank you, and we ask for a vote.
Thank you, Liberia. I give the floor to the Congo, and I have a list now of several other countries from a similar region, and I think perhaps if you're all going to say the same thing, then I think perhaps we have the message that there's a significant degree of opposition and that you don't see any desire to compromise. And if that does capture your opinion, then you could perhaps choose not to take the floor. If you still want to take the floor, just please be very, very, very succinct. Thank you. But the Congo, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think you have understood that. We align ourselves with the position of Senegal and the other countries, Burkina, Mali, Guinea, Gabon, Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia. Thank you.
Central African Republic, to be followed by the Gambia. Again, if you're just reinforcing the same line, just please do that very quickly.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. The Central African Republic thinks that this is an endemic species, and its range state is the country that submitted this. So we think that national provisions will be more than sufficient to manage this species. So the CAR rejects the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Central African Republic. I give the floor to the Gambia, followed by Burundi.
Thank you, Chair. The Gambia joined College of West and Central Africa region to express its opposition to the proposal submitted. We consider this proposal lacks data and is not scientifically robust. We do not consider this species meets the criteria for inclusion in Appendix 2. We ask that this proposal is being put to a vote and will oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gambia. I now go to Burundi, followed by Benin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Burundi is speaking to align itself with Senegal and the other countries. The local measures for conservation mean that it should be aligned. Thank you.
Thank you, Burundi. And I'm just clarifying that we're on proposal 14, the Chinese water dragon. I got my numbering mixed up, but I'll continue by giving the floor now to Benin. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank the proponents, but we do not believe the species meets the criteria for listing in Appendix 2, and so we join those who have spoken before in rejecting this proposal. And as you have already started to say, we would like to suggest this be submitted to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I now have on my list Togo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kenya, Cameroon, and Guinea-Bissau. To save us some time, if you're all going to say the same thing, I think we could help to take this forward because obviously there is a significant degree of opposition. But if that's the case, if I've already captured your kind of viewpoint, then you don't and you could save us time by not taking the floor. I think we're aware of the strength of opposition here. So you all want to speak? Okay, so I give you the floor to Togo, followed by the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Togo would like to align itself with Senegal. We believe that the information provided by Vietnam and the European Union are not sufficient, so we do not support this proposal.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. The DRC believes that the European Union's proposal meets the criteria, and we support their proposal.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of the Congo. I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Cameroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. Kenya, having looked at the proposal submitted by EU and Vietnam on the Chinese water dragon, makes reference to part 4.2 of the proposal that speaks to the issue of population size. And the proposal clearly states that data on population size of this species is lacking from all the range states except for Vietnam. However, the proposal shows that the species is widely distributed, so it may help us to understand the status of the species in these other range states, and to get an understanding of the conservation status of the species. According to IUCN, and as reported in the proposal, in its assessment in 2019, IUCN places this species as vulnerable. So for that reason, Mr. Chair, Kenya would be uncomfortable supporting the proposal, but would encourage that efforts should be made to make available the scientific data on the population size for this species, and in addition to understanding the levels of utilization of the species, looking at the 6.1 of the document of the proposal on national utilization, it indicates that although the species is in the traditional medicine, it is what is utilized in Vietnam, and that's what the proposal is stating, is very negligible. So we consider that at the moment, we may not have adequate data to justify the listing of the species in Appendix 2. However, efforts should be made to bring up this information, the scientific information, so that it can help in information, in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Cameroon, followed by Guinea-Bissau, and there are no further requests from parties, and I now close the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Cameroon will be very brief, and we suggest a vote. Thank you.
Guinea-Bissau.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Guinea-Bissau would like to state that we are not in favor of this proposal.
Thank you, Guinea-Bissau. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to invite any observers to speak on this proposal, but I would like to go back to either of the proponents for their reflections on the way forward. Clearly, there is a degree of support, but also a significant amount of opposition to this proposal. So if either Vietnam or the European Union would like to indicate, and of course a lot of the parties opposing have asked for a vote, I invite either European Union or Vietnam to give their reflections.
Thank you, Chair. Water dragon was collected for different purposes, for example, for food in local market or also international purchase. So as we state in our proposals, 1.4 million individuals was exported from Vietnam into EU or also United States. So we think that FASIC Natus consensus is meet the criteria to include in Appendix 2, and therefore we invited all the party to support our proposal. Thank you.
Okay, so it seems the only way to resolve this is through a vote. There's clearly no consensus on the proposal, so I will now begin to get ready for a vote, and if delegates could take their seat, remain in their seats, and while we go through the voting procedure. So I think we've got people walking around there. Could you take your seats quickly, please, so that we can move onwards with this? Right. So can people please sit down at their delegation seats, please? Thank you. So this is a proposal, this is a vote for proposal 14, Physignathus cosincinus. The proposal is to include in Appendix 2. The vote is by normal vote, and the vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. This is a vote on a proposal for the amendment of the appendices, and so requires a 2/3 majority to succeed. If you vote yes, you are voting in favor of the proposal. If you vote no, you are voting against it. I'm just going to check that the technicians are ready to proceed with the vote.
We're ready, Chair.
Thank you. So parties, you have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Technicians, could you display the results on the screen, please? This proposal obtained more than a 2/3 majority, so the recommendation from this committee to the final plenary will be that it is adopted. So if the technicians could display the individual votes of parties. Right, thank you, technicians. That's a full cycle, so parties should have been able to check their votes. We only have about 10 minutes left, and I'm not sure that that's the best way to... I don't think it's enough time to open a proposal and enable an adequate debate. So what I'm going to suggest we do is go back to summary records, and we were up, I recall, to CoP19, COM1, Rec 6. So this being a summary record of the 6th session of Committee 1, which was held in the afternoon of the 17th of November. So I invite any comments or corrections on the summary record from parties. See, Iceland, you have the floor.
I believe you are referring to the session in the afternoon of the 17th.
That is correct, yes. So the document is titled COP19, COM1, Rec 6.
Now, I, first of all, had expected a more exact rendition or reflection of the intervention that I made. I have received I asked specifically that it would be noted that the Icelandic delegation noted discrepancy between the IDs by the CITES Secretariat and the FAO expert panel, and urged the participants or the institutions to establish a more active coordination. If this cannot be put in this way, then I would ask for my intervention to be included as an annex. Thank you.
So Iceland, if you feel that the summary record hasn't captured your intervention correctly, you can introduce text now that does that to make sure that the summary record has got your intervention captured correctly. So if you want to give us some text for this and indicate precisely where in the summary record you want it inserted, then we can take that as a correction. I do recall your statement, I remember you making it, so if it's not here, then please indicate where you'd like it to be and precisely what you would like it to say. I can give you a couple of moments if you want to collect your thoughts.
Maybe even at the very beginning of the text, because this was a point that was not only referring to the particular proposal and the discussion, but in fact all proposals on marine species, because there was a discrepancy in several instances. So maybe at the very beginning, if you could have an Iceland, even you're supported by Mauritania, noted discrepancies between the advice by the CITES Secretariat and that of the expert panel, and urged the institutions to establish a more active coordination.
Okay, if you could, we can insert that, in the opening chapeau, maybe after the first sentence. But if you could just give that to us again a little more slowly, so that we and the rapporteurs can capture it accurately.
Iceland, and I think I can say supported by Mauritania, noted discrepancies between the advice by the CITES Secretariat and that of the FAO expert panel, and urged the institutions to establish a more active coordination.
Okay, thank you, Iceland. We have captured that and will be inserted in the summary record. So I see no further requests from the floor. So with that, we can consider COP19, COP1, Rec 6 adopted with the amendments we've just heard. I will now move on to COP1 Rec to COP19, COP1 Rec 7. So do any parties, I see China, you want to take the floor?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, can I just go back to the document 6?
Okay, China, thank you. I had technically adopted it, but I'll give you some leeway. So if you want to come back to document 6 on this occasion, I'll allow that, but please, parties, be ready to respond to these summary records and have your intervention. As I say, we will use small bits of time in the program to try and capture any amendments or corrections and so that we can adopt them. So China, you wish to go ahead with your comment?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, on proposal 37, so we suggest at paragraph 7, after the first comma, we would like to add China suggested as establishing an in-session working group for interested parties to discuss the species listing so as to maximize support from parties. Thank you, Chair.
I think we've got that, China, but perhaps if you would just repeat it one more time so that everybody has got your text correctly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, after the first comma of paragraph 7, so the wording is, China suggested establishing an in-session working group for interested parties to discuss the species listing so as to maximize support from parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China, and I think we've captured that correctly. So we adopt the document for a second time with the additional amendments proposed by China. We still have a couple of minutes left, so I will see if there are any comments or corrections on COP19 COM1 Rec 7. And I see WWF asking for the floor. So you have the floor.
Yes, please. Yes, thank you, Chair. Just briefly, at the start of page 2 of the summary record, the sentence, the European Union and its member states and the United Kingdom and WWF opposed it. I only say this because there's another observer that's mentioned in relation to supporting. So to put WW and WWF after United Kingdom on the first line. Thank you.
Thank you, WWF. We can do that. I don't see any other requests for the floor. So with that, I think we can adopt this summary record, COP19, COM1, Rec 7, as amended. So before, I think we will leave it there. We only have a minute left. So I will we will put on the daily schedule the plans for tomorrow. But my intention is that we will try and catch up on some working documents tomorrow morning and perhaps also COM documents as well. So my intention tomorrow morning is to start with 87.1, followed by 72, 58, 74, and document 60. And I hope we can also look at the 2 COM docs, so COP19 COM1.1 and COP19 COM1.2, which are on items 63 on eels and 70 on rosewood, respectively. I will try and give more clarity on what will follow that tomorrow, but we're likely to move into listing proposals again in the afternoon. So that is my intention on how to begin tomorrow morning. And again, whenever there is a spare moment, a few minutes, I will move to adopt summary record documents where I can. So I think with that, we are a minute over time. Thank you to the interpreters for their indulgence. But with that, I will, we have some announcements and a secretariat. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. As usual, just a reminder of the working groups that are meeting this evening. At 5:15, aquatic species listed in the CITES appendices. That's in ISTMO 2. Also at 5:15, wildlife crime enforcement support in Western Central Africa. That's in ISMO 1. CITES and Forests is meeting at 5:15 in Carib 5. And lastly, the Budget Working Group is meeting in Pacifica 1 at 5:30. Lastly, Chair, just a little reminder, please take your cards with you from your machines, but don't take your headsets with you. So take your cards, but not your headsets. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. And with that, we can close this afternoon's session. Have a good evening. Long day tomorrow. Good night.